There's only two ways in which you're going to grow your client base. It's going to be a push or a pull strategy. In this video, we're going to go over what is push, what is pull, and what makes the most sense for your business.
I would say the biggest thing that a lot of companies get wrong is they spend all this time trying to write fancy content. They buy these infographics, they put together the nice slide decks.
They hire people.
Yeah, they hire people. They get the graphic designers, they get the explainer videos, all this stuff, and nobody cares. So content is kind of a tricky thing to start with because it's always going to take some time to figure things out. Like you have to learn the algorithm of the platform, let's say. You have to figure out which types of media work best on which platforms. You have to figure out which platform your audience consumes the most content from. And then it builds upon itself. So if you have 0 followers, you don't have any authority or anything. So they look at the account and they're like, oh, this is nobody follows them. They must not be good, whatever. So it's just a very slow start. Just as with SEO, you pump out all this blog content, you probably are not going to you're not going to break even on ROI probably for a year doing SEO. Seriously. So
then it's going to happen.
Yeah, one snowball hits the other, and then next thing you know, eventually you get the whole avalanche coming through. But at the start, you're not going to get hardly anything off of it. So generally speaking, it is better to start with outreach than to spend a lot of time on content. Just go directly to the prospects, directly to them, start pitching them, figure out, okay, does anyone want this? Once you have a validated concept, okay, now it's, well, which platform should I make content, right? So how do I tactically choose how I'm going to make content, right? So
ask your people that you're having conversations with.
Which social platforms do you use? There's research online too, like, biggest social media platform for IT people, right? A lot of them use Reddit, right? Whereas HR, biggest platform, probably LinkedIn. Whereas, let's say it's, cleaning services people, probably Facebook, right? Real estate people, probably Facebook.
And that goes back to the beginning of our conversation.
Yeah.
Understanding your market.
So then it's, let's say you've got 3 potential ones that seem interesting. Then it's just splitting it up and testing different types of content on each. And then just seeing, okay, yeah, we're getting more traffic from this one, but it's not bringing us leads. Generally speaking, with content marketing, you really want to lead with value and then put something out like a lead magnet to build your email list. And then, maybe you could do a live event where you're not pitching them directly. Let's say you're asking them to DM you afterward. You're trying to get them in with a low ticket sort of offer and then upsell them. And like Gary Vee says, he released a book on this. You jab, right hook. You throw a ton of value, and then you hit them with the ask. The longer you delay the ask, the bigger the ask you can make, right? So what did I do? The first 4 months I was on Twitter, I just gave a ton of value about LinkedIn. Then I dropped my course. Next thing you know, it's the #1 LinkedIn course on Gumroad, right? And if I had released it and been pushing it after month 1, I would not have grown nearly as quickly and I would not have made nearly as many sales, right?
And you probably would have angered some people.
Yes.
Would have been spamming. So
yes,
they trusted Jeremy. I follow Jeremy, and the value that he gives is sometimes as is the course, but there's just more in the course, and it just provides trust. I trust what Jeremy's putting out because it's validated. Other people have results. He's continually doing it without asking or thinking about that he's going to receive something. And then after time, you're actually just kind of curious as a buyer. All right, what do these guys do? You guys helped me doing this already. I wonder what they could help me if I gave them money.
Yeah. And a lot of times I see people. So one of my coaching clients, sort of the done with you, I advise them on what their marketing average is and all this stuff. He does very, very slick slide decks for, let's say, a $10 million pitch. They have to be really solid. And he wasn't doing live events content where he would put together slide deck content, right? It's like you're the best in the world at creating slide decks and you're not using slide decks as content, right? It makes no sense to not use a visual. And then so he starts doing live events. He starts using that stuff in his email copy. Suddenly it works, right? So some types of content are more suited to certain industries. So I worked in the data center industry for a few years, and blogging, yes, was good. There wasn't a whole whole lot of competition, but I would say social media in general, not so much. Instagram, it was like tons of pictures of hardware, didn't really bring in a whole lot of stuff. Obviously Facebook content wasn't going to do a whole lot. Reddit ads and Reddit content seems like a good idea, but that channel is very social and they're very shrewd, so they don't want to be pitched to at all. On LinkedIn, the content just wasn't the sexy factor was not there, right? So nobody wanted to read about IT asset dispositioning. It's not as exciting as, oh, hey, now we can spin up like 1,000 virtual machines when we used to only be able to do 10 and it was way harder, right? It was very boring to these people. And so organic content didn't make a lot of sense. Really, we needed to hit them when they were at the stage in their project where it made sense for us to come in. And so for us, it was very much so a volume approach where they didn't really want us to be following up every week unless it was kind of entertaining. They just wanted us to follow up and say, is this the right time? Yada, yada, give them like guides, resources to prep for when they were at that stage in the project. And then we knew where they were in the project cycle, right? In the life cycle of their hardware. So if you're doing any content marketing in general, you got to understand the ROIs are going to come later. And then the other thing is, how difficult is it to create content for your medium, right? So in our case, when I had to write a data center decommissioning checklist, extremely difficult subject to cover. Very few people in the world even know how to do this in a really ironclad way, or at least the processes that they could formalize and put on paper, right? So I had to go out and find one of the world's experts on data center migration and interview him. And I had to go meet with other logistics guys for data centers. It was a large time I had to invest up front to put this together. So if we were just going to publish this as like a LinkedIn post or as a blog, it would make no sense at all. So we made it a lead magnet where if they wanted the full version, they had to give us their email or whatever. But if we couldn't use it as a lead magnet, it would have never been worth it because it's so costly on the front end to make that content. Whereas let's say you are in the luxury watch niche. All you have to do is snap a picture of a watch and put it on Instagram. It's very easy to make content. Yeah. So it's about analyzing how much time does it take per post? How many impressions do we get per post? If we were going to pay for ads for that many impressions, how much money would it cost? And then of those, is our conversion rate, matching up with that? Does it make sense? So back to outreach. So in terms of coordinating channels, so if you get a lot of people engaged with one type of organic post, let's say it's about, wiping data on your hard drives for this data center operation. Okay. Then maybe you use that in your email copy. You already know they're interested in it because they're engaging with your content. So now you make that your outreach and suddenly they're more interested, right? In the same vein, you do your outreach, they ignore certain subject lines, some subject lines they're very interested in, then you use that to inform your content, right? Anything to add on which channels to use, content versus outreach?
I just also think it comes a lot down to consistency. Like it takes 12 to 14 touch points to really convert a sale is like the data out there. So like those 12 touch points don't have to be 12 emails, right? Like mix in a little bit of both, right? So don't ever put all your eggs in basket in just content marketing and then don't always put it into outreach, because if you're doing outreach, I'd say about probably 65% of the people that you email will probably check you out, right? They'll at least check the email that you emailed from, right? They'll go to your website, they'll go to your LinkedIn if they go directly to your name, or they'll go on a company blog, or they'll do some type of research before they buy 100%, and they'll do some sort of research before they book. So you do want to have content that would then support the outreach that you're doing. And that's what Jeremy said is like, if something's working here, use it on both, right? Because then you're going to become more of an authoritative figure on that exact. So if you're talking about wiping your hard drive, your email should be about wiping your hard drive. And they're like, oh, this is kind of interesting. They go to your website, they go, oh, here's an actual article that provides value on wiping a hard drive. Maybe I'll email them back, or maybe I'll sign up to the email list, or you're just trying to get these people inside of your ecosystem, whether it's content versus outreach. But it does come a lot down to how hard is it to create the content. Is outreach is easier versus content than do 80-20 outreach. If content is easier, if you have watches, right, that might be really hard to cold email to, right? Trying to find high net worth individuals that might want to watch. That's hard to build an email list off of. It's much easier to create content to then have them in the ecosystem where then you can then outreach them once they've opted in. So it's really going to come down to what makes sense for your business, what makes sense for your market and your customer, because that's what truly matters. And then really comes down to touch points versus frequency, or I just mentioned, like consistently pushing out content. If you don't get the number of likes or the number of engagements in the beginning, like don't quit. Like if you continually do it, people will start to listen, and you'll have that one post that just blows up and makes all of what you did previously worth. So if you're thinking about quitting and you're watching this video, keep going, keep putting out your content, keep doing your outreach. And then I think that's really all I had for content versus outreach. If there's anything else you want to
I want to riff on that. Yeah. So it obviously it depends on the size of your offer as well. So one of my clients, he sells very, very high ticket business coaching / consulting for construction businesses. So to try and sell that in cold DMs, in the cold LinkedIn message directly, impossible. You're never going to do it. I mean, you might get one fluke every now and then. So the higher ticket the product or service, the more content, the more trust that you need to build, the longer the sales cycle is going to be. And so on the flip side, if you have something that's, more transactional, they're not giving you their social security number or something. Maybe all they need to see is that you've got a Google My Business page that doesn't have like only 1-star reviews, right? So there's a spectrum there. And if what you're selling is very, very transactional and it's not very visual, then okay, sure. Maybe doing cold outreach makes more sense. And so the other thing I would say is to get the content that works, if you always take the mindset of they don't care about me, they don't care about my company, they don't want to know about me, what do they want? What can I solve for them? So on Twitter, for example, I spent a lot of time putting together SOPs and how to grow a business and what have you. And I noticed that the content that talked about getting your first client, getting your first $10,000 a month in or whatever, had way more engagement. And it was because none of these people were at the point in their business where they really needed to scale or could scale, right?
Probably overwhelmed.
Yeah. So at every point, it's just, we don't care that, you've been in business 10 years. Ooh, celebrated our 10-year mark. We don't care that, this is the second post about us being at this conference. Ooh, look how authoritative we are. Nobody cares, right? So what we do care about is, we found this service at this conference that's really cool and interesting and useful for this particular demographic, right? That's what they care about. And then the other thing is, so you're not going to get a whole lot of engagement. I would say on Twitter, maybe my first month, I maybe had a couple hundred, right? And then the second month I gained like 3,000. So if I quit at the end of month one, I would have assumed, if you assumed that was the growth, I would have thought, this is too linear. It's not worth my time, right? But it's not linear. So,
and then the last thing I'll say is internal versus outsource. So content versus outreach is similar, but very different. I'm better at outreach. I'm saying you're probably better at outreach than overall content marketing. So if you're good at one thing and maybe not so good at the second, maybe that's where you want to outsource some of that content and then do something internally. So it's always like a struggle, like, I want to do everything in house. That could be much more expensive. You have to hire correctly. It takes longer amount of time. And if you're paying a salary to somebody, or if you want to outsource something. So I always recommend to my clients is like, do both, right? Have someone who's an expert at something that you may not be an expert with, have them do what they're doing, be autonomous, and then help them out, or vice versa, and use content or outreach so you can achieve the greater goal of hitting people organically, reaching out to people directly, and you're going to have much more success when you marry them. And that kind of goes into like what to invest in and then when to invest.
Yeah. So one more thing on the internal versus outsourcing thing. So some things are easier to outsource than others, right? Yeah. So it's difficult to outsource, let's say, an operations person if you're doing manufacturing, right? So if they're not in the factory, working hands-on, and they understand your full business, they've been in the industry, whatever, it's a little tricky, but you can outsource to a operations director or a COO that's been in the industry to advise your in-house operations person. On the flip side, it's extremely easy to outsource graphic creation. It's extremely easy. And honestly, you can get somebody to do on Fiverr that it's so easy, right?
A couple $100.
Yeah, if that. So what often often works best is if you've got a budget, you don't want to use it frivolously. So what our company did to get to the Inc. 5000 so quickly was they brought on me, who is a rising talent who had a couple years of marketing experience, but wasn't quite as fleshed out yet. And we used an external marketing agency to teach me, and then every week direct me on what to learn and what to improve, what to focus on. And after a year of that, then they built me up to the point where, okay, now I can actually run this department. And then it was me deciding which things needed to be shored up by external resources. So we brought on a LinkedIn consultant who.
How slow would that process? Manager had to work with you as well.
It would have been literally impossible. I'm not kidding.
Yeah.
If I had to learn everything myself,
I would have quit.
no, it would have been, we would never have even begun to have results. And so that's the nice thing about outsourcing is you can look at their case studies, their testimonials, what the previous work they've done. When you hire somebody to be an to be a marketing manager or something, and they say, oh, our company did this or whatever, unless they ran like I did and ran the sales team and there's videos showing I ran the entire thing, you don't know how much they contributed. You don't know if there was some external force, like if the company was already growing at a certain amount. So you don't know what you're going to get when you bring that person on, as opposed to, you can't make sure 100% that this outsourced company is going to work. But if they've got 50 really good case studies and testimonials, and they can find you recommendations from other experts in the industry, you find me on Twitter and you see every top marketing person on Money Twitter vouching for me, it's a pretty good bet you're going to get some value, right? Whereas you're not going to find that hiring some marketing manager. They don't have an army of other experts recommending them. Yeah. It's just not how it works.
And it's not their primary focus. So when you outsource and like say you're working with an agency, like that's what they do. Their entire business predicated on this one single. So trust them with that one single thing. And if they don't work, give them 3 to 4 months of a runway. Oh, it's day 17. They haven't gotten me $1 million. Let's move on with another one. But the nice thing is like they don't take unemployment after they leave. Yep. They don't call out sick. There's a lot of different hidden benefits for cost when it's outsourced.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is, it's easier to vet them too. So like, for example, if let's say, you're going to work with some lead gen company and you say, oh, they pitch you a contract term of like a year, right? You say, I don't know if I want to commit for a year. Can we just do month to month? Unless it's an SEO agency, if this is a really good demand gen company, they're going to be confident enough that they can get you something at the end of month one that you'll stay on, right? So, there's
strategy at least.
Yeah. There are all these different ways that you can tease out, like, are these guys just trying to collect money up front and then ditch like a lot of agencies do? Or, do they actually know what they're doing? Right. So, I would say, I would ask for some tea, like if they're really good at what they do, say, if we can't get X result within 90 days, like, are you willing to put a guarantee in there? Yeah, I put a guarantee. In fact, my guarantee was so ridiculous. I literally said, if you are at any point dissatisfied at any point in the contract ever in perpetuity and you ask for your money back, I will give it every dollar, because I was so confident that they would want to keep me around, that they would not want to let me go, even if they could just say, hey, yeah, give me $50,000 back, because they believed they would get more out of me than the money they initially paid in, even through the entire year. So if they're good, trust me, they're willing to give you a guarantee.
And if they don't give you a guarantee, then be skeptical.
Yeah.
Yeah. The most important part about any outreach or sales campaign really boils down to the data that you have on hand. No matter how good your script is or how good your softwares are or how good your salespeople ultimately are, it really doesn't matter unless you have the best and the correct data. So in this video, we're going to go through how to find the best data, what's the most important data points to be considered about, and how you can really amplify your sales process with focusing on the foundation, which is the who you are targeting.
You may be wondering where you can source data to find leads, to find customers, to email, to send messages to on LinkedIn, etc. So just a quick brief overview of some of the scraping tools and data providers that you can use. So Octoparse is really quite interesting. It keeps the data organized for you. It'll pull contact information off of websites. Clean Leads is a white labeled version of sell-sas.com. If you want to just buy it, it's $200 per month, but you can get it for free if you also white label it. And then in terms of data, oh yeah, I forgot, there's two others. So Texau, Texau, is another web scraper. It's kind of like Zapier, but for connecting websites together. And then there's Phantom Buster, which has lots of different quote unquote phantoms. They're bots that just do different things. Like, let's say you wanted to scrape all your LinkedIn messages, or you wanted to scrape the people that liked a LinkedIn course or something, right?
Or a Facebook group.
Or a Facebook group, or any one of those things, right?
Apollo is another great tool that you can use that's pretty cost effective.
Yeah, so for sourcing data, then you've got your data providers. So like Apollo is the cheap but good enough option. If you start at $99 a month is like the professional plan that you'll want. They'll try and downsell you to $19 a month if you try and cancel after a month. Little known hack.
Don't listen, Apollo.
Don't listen, Apollo. And then you can automate the selection, because it only let you select more than 25 at a time to export. So you can automate that with like Tiny Task or something. Again, don't listen, Apollo. The super high tier option is ZoomInfo that a lot of people know. If you're kind of just getting started, if your company's not at like 5 to 10 million a year, I really don't think ZoomInfo is worth it. The crazy $40,000 price point or whatever it is.
Yeah, and we use Cognism for our company. They're like the new kid on the block to ZoomInfo. They have much more phone data than ZoomInfo has. And then in between like Apollo and ZoomInfo and Cognism, you're going to be in like Seamless.ai. They have unlimited licenses, so you can pull lots of leads quickly. But with Apollo and Seamless, a lot of the leads maybe already being used. So these people are definitely being contacted a lot. So you have to take that into mind. These aren't like brand new, fresh leads, right? These people are beginning cold emails. They're people who are probably immune to a lot of cold email or cold outreach. And then also make sure to clean those leads, right? They're not 100% scrubbed in these databases. Also, people move jobs. The great, what do they call it? This year, the most people have left and joined new jobs.
Yeah.
So you'll have a lot of those bounces, which hurt and affect your deliverability over time. So make sure to use like zero bounce
or never bounce, or bulk email checkers, the cheap one.
Yeah. So make sure you're sending to valid emails. Catch-alls, you can, but if you have to, if you have like a small list, you can probably go after catch-alls, but you never want to be emailing to like info ats or inboxes that aren't managed by the actual person you're reaching out to. You want to actually reach out to the decision maker for sure.
Yeah. So no sales at, no finance at. And then,
because think about it, if you have that as a business, right? Like, reach out to us at info at, like those emails aren't checked regularly.
Yeah. Those are the spam emails.
Those are the spam emails.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, and I just want to reiterate, like, even though Apollo is the cheaper option, it's good enough. You can 100% book meetings and close deals off of emails sent to an Apollo list. Like, don't buy the hype that you need this super fancy, expensive list or whatever. The other one is
Sales Navigator. Right?
Yeah, so you can scrape Sales Navigator. I mean, well, a guy I know scraped Sales Navigator. I would never do that to break their terms of service or anything, like everybody else does ever. And Sales QL is one that a guy I know would use to enrich the Sales Navigator searches. And then the other one is Uplead. That's pretty interesting as a source of data. I haven't used it personally, but I've heard good things.
Yeah.
So that's a good segue into, so we've been talking about outreach a lot. In what cases do you want to use content versus outreach? So
one thing before we hop onto that, Just wanted to say, get creative, right? Like, don't just use your Apollo filters, like actually think about your business, like go into what technologies they use and get a smaller but more targeted, intentional list from these big data providers, right? It can be overwhelming. Like, oh, I have 20,000 people that match these criteria. Like, get more granular with your search criteria and then write a message to that. Like, hey, I saw you use, a SQL database. We help SQL databases. So like use your offer and your service in your filtering criteria, as well as like leveraging LinkedIn groups, leveraging Facebook groups. Think about where your ideal customer lives, where they are engaging, and then reach out to them or find them on the places that they're most active, right? Like reaching out to someone who may not ever use LinkedIn with LinkedIn messaging probably won't get you great results regardless of how good your messaging is. So really understand who it is that you're reaching out to and how is the best way to get in contact.
Yeah, so on that front, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with that. But one example that I think makes things clear is, so let's say you're a LinkedIn automation company and you have a really good solution. The founder of a company I know that does that targeted a Facebook group of growth hackers on LinkedIn, and his connection rates were like 70%. His reply rates were like 80% because he found them where they were at in a very, very specific niche down, very homogenous group, and then spoke very, very directly to that specific grouping with an offer that actually is very relevant to them. So, I mean, you can do it by like maybe they're hiring for a graphic designer. If you're selling some graphic service that, lets them do graphics for themselves, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can splice the data. I will say one thing is that I find it useful to allocate at least a small percentage of your outreach to a broader swath, just in case you catch some other kind of targeting that you might not think would make sense, while you dedicate most to one that seems most relevant. So like the 80-20 rule. And then, that way you're still allocating most of your resources to one that's most likely to work, but you're also going to catch any opportunities to come around. Maybe that's 20%, maybe it's 10%, maybe you don't bother. It's just one that I found has been useful for me on occasion.
Yeah, the analogy I like to use is like in war, right? You have like artillery and then you have like snipers, right? So you want to, barrage your market with, more general, larger cast outreach. And then you also want to have your more strategic, intentional outreach to parlay on top of that.